What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Dunk Up the Ship podcast. This is episode 76. This is a Q&A that I did on Discord recently, which if you don't know what that is, it is a server-based like chat voice platform. I guess people use it for gaming quite a bit, and it has evolved into kind of like a multi-purpose thing. It has a lot of functionality, kind of like Zoom. But it has like voice channels, video channels, and like these, it's almost like chat kind of. It's interesting. I don't fully understand it quite yet, but I've been on the Navy server for a little while. And if you get on Discord, it's a public server that you can just go find, and then it has a bunch of different channels and stuff. And the mods from that invited me to do a live Q&A that we were able to record, which was really cool. I had a great time doing it, because it was a live thing. So there was a bunch of people in there, and then the mods read a bunch of questions that got kind of dropped in by a bunch of other people. And yeah, it was really, really cool. I had a lot of fun interacting with all the people that are there. I definitely plan on doing it again. And what you'll see from this episode is, so first, you're going to hear one of the mods kind of describe what Discord is and how they use the Navy server to do the things that they do, and then there'll be a transition into the actual Q&A piece. So I really hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I definitely enjoyed making it, so check it out.
So I just want to say that this is it's a U.S. Navy Discord server. It was founded by a U.S. Navy sailor. We got a pretty great, diverse group of people here from all different kinds of communities. Though you will see, like, predominantly there's a lot of intel folk here. We have chiefs on the mod staff. We have one chief on the mod staff, and he's done an amazing job mentoring sailors. And we have even, very junior, like third classes who are moderators here, that they're the computer generation. They know how to get all this stuff set up on Discord, and, they set up the podcast here with a recording bot that I didn't even know existed. And so shout out to the mod staff. They're fantastic. And we have just people here who sometimes they come in, they ask a single question, and just kind of pulling from this wealth of knowledge. We have different branches in here. And what else can I say about it? Grace, you want to say anything?
No, I think you just about covered it. Just that we have a ton of good knowledge in this place, and we're actually here to help. Sometimes you can be jaded, you can complain and stuff. Here's a good place to keep it productive, where you complain with a purpose, No,
I was just gonna say, no, it's awesome. And it's like, I like it for the same reasons I like Reddit, except I think that it's like a different flavor, I guess, just a different version. And I think Reddit can get a little out of control sometimes, but it's still productive, and you still see a lot of people getting help with issues there as well. So like, I think it's cool. It's not just cool, but it's necessary, because like people ask like why the Chiefs mess has a closed door. And that's a big part of it, is that you can go behind that closed door and just like have a meltdown, vent, complain, whatever, get it out of your system, and also find help. And a lot of times E6 and below don't have that mechanism anywhere. And that's a problem. Like, so it's really cool to see stuff like this popping up, like, and some of it I'm sure has been around forever and I'm just unaware of it, but like, it's cool. And somebody invited me to check out Reddit. I went and checked it out, and have not just like learned things and gotten a lot of awesome feedback about the podcast, but I've had guests come out of that, and just like a lot of really cool, like, guys I consider friends now, it's just awesome. And then like for this too, like, it's really cool to see another mechanism. And this has like voice and all this other stuff. That I did a podcast on Discord the other day with if you're not familiar with the guys from Test Depth, it's like submarine focused clothing brand, and they do a podcast called On the Midwatch, and it's just submariners talking about submarine stuff generally. And I did it through this, and there's a video function, and when they recorded it and all this stuff, and I didn't even know any of this was real. So it's cool to see this exist, and that there's another community out there for sailors to come vent, come ask for help, come just kind of lay it all out and get support, or just like, you're not the only one or whatever. Like, it's awesome.
Can we keep it pretty chill in here?
If I may, real quick.
Absolutely.
Think about the group. We also have Lifeline to Help. Like, I'm sure you and a lot of your listeners have heard of Chief Khan and all the things that he's been able to do. Chief
Yep.
Paul and the people that work with him are also on the server. We actively work. We've actually been able to help several sailors as well directly through the server, working with them. So that's a great resource as well, being able to help out people with mental health issues directly through the server.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Yeah, I had Chief Khan on the podcast it was a couple years ago at this point, but I think it was like episode 32 or something. It's pretty far back, but it was. I think he's the first interview I ever did, actually. But he's amazing. Yeah, like he was a guy that, it was funny. I tell this story, but I've told him too, but like when I first saw his videos on Reddit, I like rolled my eyes because I was like, oh, look at this dude in his dress blues, like doing videos about whatever. But then like I finally listened to it because I tried to be like, all right, stop being judgmental, you jerk. And like actually, because then I saw a lot of positive feedback and I was like, all right, I got to check this guy out and see what he's all about. And when I first listened to his stuff, I was just like, oh, I get it. Like this dude's awesome. And then I'm like, I have to talk to him. And so, yeah, we did a podcast and I still connect with him here and there and check in on him. But great dude. And that's awesome that you guys are using this for that as well. It's incredible because I always kind of wondered, like he would post like, hey, somebody's in trouble. They're in this area. And he's like trying to figure out who they are. I always kind of wondered how he did that. And now I kind of know. That's pretty awesome. All right. So that was the quick introduction. I know it was a few minutes of them talking, but I thought it was important to get that context out there. Maybe most of you know what Discord is, but I sure didn't. So I thought that was an important piece there. And so now we'll transition into the Q&A portion. Enjoy.
All right, so those of you guys on voice chat right now, you'll be muted by default, but if you'd like a chance to speak, just say so in the questions chat, and we'll unmute you and you'll have your chance.
Questions. Let's go. I'm in. I'm ready.
So we have a bunch of questions already ready. I don't know where you want to go.
Should I just start answering those and then if somebody wants to talk, or are you going to just let them ask the question as well?
Your podcast.
I mean, it'd be cooler if people talked, but if they're uncomfortable doing that, I'm happy to like read the question and then it'd be a lot cooler if it was more like me.
Some of the mods to like take turns reading the questions that were asked in advance.
Yeah, that's fine. Let's do that. We can catch up.
Okay. So the first question comes from Ventura. He is unfortunately unable to be here because he's on a flight. Yeah. And he hopes the recording goes well. And he says, "Hi, Master Chief. Currently Neb sub school. Sorry.
Sub school, got it.
He's in school. Student here, making my way through the SES pipeline. I'm already stressing about getting my fish, as it's been explained as pretty much the most important an aspect to regard being a submariner. My question is, though, throughout the process, how supportive is the crew? I know hazing in today's Navy is relatively rarely tolerated, but will my chain be supportive or have the attitude of, why should I help, for this lack of a better term, nub? Thanks so much."
Yeah. Okay. So there's a couple of questions there. Really, it's so like, how worried should you be about it? It's going to be the most important thing you got going on. For some rates, there's going to be watches that you have to qualify as. Along with that, they're going to kind of expect you to do an entry level watch station at the same time you're working on your dolphin quals, which is totally doable. How the crew supports you and how your chain of command supports you are they're two different things, right? So your chain of command, hopefully they're awesome. Like your divisional and departmental chain of command, hopefully they're great and they're really supportive. A lot of times, they'll put you in a position to kind of make quals the most important thing. So you might be on the decks as an FSA working for somebody like me, and you'll have plenty of time to work on quals, but your chain of command might put you in a position where you're standing at a UI and they're pushing you to get qualified because the watch bill needs you right now. Oh my God. And they're more worried about that and the watch bill support than they are about your dolphins and whatever else you got going on. So what you really need to focus on is just like getting your fish, that part that you're worried about, getting that done. And this will translate to your division as well in your department, like especially for like nukes and stuff. They have so many quals outside of dolphins that like dolphins almost they're. I would say I think most nukes would agree that dolphins are kind of secondary to everything else, but it's happening like in parallel. So what you'll see when you're doing any qualifications on a ship, submarine, whatever, is the more effort you put into it, and I like real effort where you're studying, you're walking around the ship looking for components and asking questions, and the senior sailors that are qualified, that are the SMEs that are going to be signing your qual card, the more they see you out there working really hard trying to get your dolphins, the more they're going to get behind you and push. So it's very dependent on how much real effort they see you putting in. Like if you're staying up and you're oncoming a little bit and you're always running around asking questions and getting checkouts and working with people and helping other non-quals and those other things, like the more they see you around the submarine, the more those people are going to conspire to help you, because all those salty second classes are going to see you, and then they're going to talk to each other. They're going to be like, oh, hey, this guy came to me and extremely prepared for this checkout and was constantly asking more questions even after the checkout was over. And they're always running around the machinery room or torpedo room or wherever, like looking for components and trying to learn new things and whatever. So that's going to spread really quickly. Like they're going to be all sitting around when they're burning a flick on the mess decks or whatever, talking about like those kinds of things, or when they interact with you or whatever, like those conversations are going to come up and they're going to talk about you as one of the non-quals that is working really hard to get their fish. And you'll see them once in a while, one of those guys will just grab you and drag you into their space and start teaching you something, which is not normal. Like normally they're going to make you work for it and get in the book and learn the drawing and everything else. But if you, especially if you can draw something, if there's a drawing that's applicable, they're going to just drag you in there because you're one of the ones that's on like you're on the hot running list because you're ahead on the qual you're being tracked on. And they're going to just see you and know that you're one of the ones that gets it and is working really hard towards that qualification. So they're going to drag you in there and just teach you things because they want to help you. And so you're going to see that happen the more effort you put in. So it kind of depends on you. You control a lot of it. The junior enlisted that are the fully qualified folks that are going to sign most of your qual card, and even the chiefs, like, because a lot of there's supervisory quals and stuff like that. You're going to see that stuff happen with them too. Like they're going to notice, or they're going to be told by those salty second classes and the LPOs, like, hey, this guy getting after it, constantly up, doing quals, whatever. So you control a lot of it by the amount of effort and enthusiasm you put into it. And I hope that answers that question. But don't worry too much about it. It's definitely the thing you're going to spend the most time on. The quicker you get it done, the less painful your life's going to be during the first year and a half on the submarine. So, but yeah, the more effort and enthusiasm you put into it, the more support you're going to get.
Awesome. The next question comes from local community server dad, RMFN. I'm going to go ahead and unmute him if you'd like a chance to answer or ask this question out loud. He muted himself.
Okay. So no, just read it. That's fine.
So his question is: as a United States Navy Master Chef, can you outcook Gordon Ramsay's mom?
Sorry, say that again. Something about Gordon Ramsay's mom?
Yeah, as a United States Navy Master Chef, can you outcook Gordon Ramsay's mom?
I have no idea if Gordon Ramsay's mom can even cook, so I'm not sure. Probably not. Gordon Ramsay's a bad dude. I've followed his career quite a bit. I've read his autobiography. Less of a fan of the Hollywood side of him, but as far as like there's a documentary out there about his early career and how he learned how to cook and stuff like that, and that is a bad dude. So I don't know, but as for his mom, I don't know. Maybe like, can she cook? I don't know. I'm definitely out of practice. I've been more on the administrative side for a long time, but I got a couple of moves. I make pretty good donuts.
All right, that's good. We got another question. I'll let Grace, can you take this one?
Yeah, right on. Am I asking Grimm's question?
No, an Aglagon.
All right. So this is one of our new ensigns on board here. So, hey, Master Chief, love the podcast, and thanks for doing this. What is your personal conception of the difference in duties, responsibilities between a Devo and a division chief? Where do you like to have the boundaries between Devo and chief in a healthy division? And I've asked this to a few other officers and chiefs now. I always get different answers because it seems that every Devo chief relationship is unique in its own way.
I would agree with that statement. It's unique, but it's not. There are definitely things that are going to be the same all the time. But it's more like the idea of that relationship and kind of where the boundaries are going to be really similar, and the goals are definitely going to be pretty much the same. But obviously unique personalities in those relationships are going to be a lot different, because you might have a brand new chief and a division officer that is an LDO, and it's like, okay, that relationship's going to be a lot different. Or even like I did an inspection recently with a supply officer that was an LS1 for 9 years. So she's a whole different case than a brand new supply officer at a supply corps school. So they're all unique for sure, but the general construct for me is, when I'm looking at it, one of the smartest things an officer has ever said to me is that the relationship that I have with a junior officer is a relationship that chiefs are going to have in about 15 years with a prospective commanding officer. The more things I can build into that JO early, and the more like prepared I can make them, and the more and really them walking away with a positive view of chiefs is a big one too, which I'm sure we'll talk about at some point. With same thing applies to junior sailors, but I want that junior officer to walk away from our relationship thinking they can trust chiefs, and not just me, right? Like all of them, because I'm going to leave a mark, right? And I know a lot of officers that I've had conversations with that kind of looked at me like, well, you're different. And it's like, well, that's disappointing that you think I'm different because you had really negative interactions with chiefs early on in your career. And I've had a commanding officer that didn't trust chiefs, like, and at some point along his way, he was burned in a relationship like that. And it may have been as a department head or Devo or whatever. But for me, that's a huge part of it, is that I'm teaching a future CO how to lead, how to manage, how to do those things, because that a line officer, division officer, because you have like the supply officers and everything else, they're going to have a different career path. But those line officers, the expertise part is important, but it's not everything, because they're not staying in that lane. They're going to go maybe be a Devo somewhere else. Like on submarines, it's like hot potato. Like you see a Devo go to 3 or 4 different divisions, and then maybe they're the A-Eng before they leave, and then they go do a department head tour, XOCO. But they're not going to stay in that lane. So it's more, I'm teaching leadership, management. I'm teaching them how to interact with senior officers, how to interact with chiefs, how to interact with the crew, to do those things to prepare them to be that leader when they move on. But they're moving on to be more of a like strategic, big picture level leader as they progress, not somebody that's going to be in the weeds micromanaging, right? Like there's definitely boundaries that I spent a lot of time on where like you're telling me which way to go and I'm the one figuring out how to get there. And so that's the conversations I would have with my supply officers. Like, look, I don't need you telling me the nuts and bolts, and I definitely don't need you telling my junior sailors what to do with their time. That goes through me. That's my job. Like, you tell me where we're going. And even then, with a division officer, we're going to be having a conversation about that, because I've gone there a whole bunch of times before and they probably haven't. So there's a lot of conversations where it's like, you know, that Thor meme where he's standing there next to the dude from Guardians of the Galaxy. He's like, they're talking about who's in charge, and like, me, right? You know, oh yeah, of course, like you. It very much is that kind of relationship, even though it's satire. They're kind of making fun of that concept, but the idea exists that it's like, yeah, you're in charge, and I'm going to put you out in front of the group and support you in any way I can, so that the division looks at you as the leader of the division. And there's a lot of things that me as that chief needs to teach them so that they can be taken seriously in that role. Because there's a lot of Devo, like junior sailors aren't stupid. They know that the Devo, like if they are just kind of letting the chief run it and just nodding and smiling, or if they're actually the type of person that is taking any kind of control and being the leader that they're supposed to be, right? And being useful in a lot of ways. And some of that is communicated to those junior sailors via like, is admin getting done? Like, is my leave getting routed up? Is my eval getting signed on time? Because like, and behind the scenes, there's a lot that the chief does with kind of sock puppeting that Devo a little bit and just saying, hey, go do this, go do, like, prioritize these things, go do this, go do that. Hey, where are those evals? And it's like pushing them to understand what the important things are and why those things are important. And honestly, like, I'm probably getting a little into the weeds because this is something that I think is not talked about enough especially amongst chiefs, where I've talked about a ton on the podcast, where like chiefs will get frustrated with how useless their Devo is, and it's like, well, they're only useless because you're not doing a good enough job teaching them. Like that's our job as chiefs, is to teach them how to be division officers and how to be good leaders. And again, like so that they then go on with a good taste in their mouth when it comes to chiefs. And keep your mind out of the gutter, everybody. But also like they're going forth to be commanding officers, so we want them to be prepared to do that, so that we're not sitting there groaning about how our CO is making our life hurt all the time. Or, I mean, the next generation of chiefs that are working for that CO. The one thing that I think is missed the most in this relationship is taking the time to sit down and explain things, which a lot of underdeveloped leaders will tell you isn't something that they need to do. But if you want to make the argument for not having to do that with junior sailors, I think you're wrong, but okay, great. But when you're doing it with a future leader, with somebody that literally outranks you and, you know, is technically in charge, when you're having that conversation, like I need to spend a lot of time sitting down and explaining to this division officer, okay, this is why you need to prioritize these things. This is why these things are important. This is how you go talk to the commanding officer or the department head about these things. And this is how you present your plan so that they take you seriously, so that you're prepared, et cetera. Right. So there should be a lot of time spent explaining things in depth to this division officer, because they're then going to, again, ascend up the ranks and be that next person. And so I want to put them in a place where when they're then a department head, and I don't know I know it progresses differently on surface ships, but on submarines, it goes, they do a Devo tour, go do some shore duty, and then come back and they're a department head. So when they're the department heads, like when they're the engineer and one of their Devos is coming to them and briefing some maintenance item, the more time you spend investing in their ability to brief that maintenance item as a JO, so it's done correctly, right? But also so that they have a realistic expectation of what they're going to receive from that junior officer and the types of questions to ask, and then taking advantage of the leadership opportunity to then train that JO during that interaction, instead of punch them in the face because they don't have the entire RPM memorized. It's like you're going to set everybody up for success long term, but you got to take the time to invest early and have the conversations with those officers and say, hey, this is how this happens. This is why this happens. But a lot of that too. So like taking that punch in the face from a department head that doesn't know how to communicate, you can prep them for that too. Like there's so many conversations that need to be had in depth that it's like, you're going to spend a lot of time talking to your division officer. And like uniquely on submarines, the supply officer is both the department head and the division officer. So generally I'll get a brand new baby ensign that is straight out of supply corps school that's supposed to function at the level of an 03 department head also somehow, because some genius decided that was a good idea. So you're trying to prep them for both, and those higher level officers are trying to demand both of them. And it's like, they don't even have their dolphins yet. They don't know what their way around the submarine. So like my supply officer was not allowed to go anywhere without me until they were ready, you know, like it was, because now you're expecting them to be a department head. So they're at like ops briefs, briefing parts status on broken pieces of gear and all that. And it's just like, I'm going to be standing right next to you, or I'm going to stand in front of you, and I'm going to be the one talking to the angry engineer because they're not prepared to do that yet. And you're not going to run over my department head. So yeah, it's super important relationship. I don't want to take any more time like going on about this, because it's going to turn into a whole thing. But
what would you do if you had someone who was a junior officer that was they weren't willing to listen? Like you talk about this relationship where they are willing to listen, but how do you handle those that don't listen?
Sure. Yeah. So it's and might be a cultural thing, but I doubt it. On submarines, it's you kind of play on the idea that like, yeah, you're in charge, but not really. So like if I light a JO on fire, they can go tell the XO, and the XO is going to be like, oh, well, what'd you do? You know, it's like, so there's been a few times where I've walked into the XO stateroom and said, hey, sir, I need you to talk to Lieutenant so-and-so because they're not listening and they need to. And it's like, if again, going back to the beginning, if that senior officer has been trained correctly and they'll learn their lessons along the way as well as a JO and a department head, and just figure some of it out themselves. They're pretty smart people. By the time you get there, when you go talk to the XO, the XO is going to listen to your explanation of it and be like, okay, I'll have a talk with them, because they understand that unless you're in a bad place where they got burned by chiefs, and then that's another conversation. But yeah, sometimes it's that. Sometimes it's like I've closed the door behind mine, and like it turned into a senior subordinate conversation where I'm not going to do that in front of my division, but there's definitely times where I'm closing the door and having a disappointed dad talk with that officer about like, hey, what do you not understand about this? Like because what's funny about it, and a lot of times it's very based on how you approach the conversation, because what's funny about it is all I exist to do is make you look good in front of this group of people. So let me make you look good. I want to teach you all these things, and I want to prepare you to do all these things. I'm not taking credit for any of it. I don't need a pat on the head. Like, I'm trying to teach you how to do all these things so that when you interact with the XO or when you go do these things on behalf of the division, that like you're doing them correctly and you're representing us well, and you're getting the things that we need from the people that we need them from. So it's like when you're having those conversations, like, what other motivation do I have other than helping you, even when I'm upset? So it's kind of framing the conversation that way with those JOs is like, hey, my only job is to prepare you for the next level and to make you a successful leader. So what do you lose by listening? You know what I mean? But there's times too where there's chiefs that, like I said earlier, they don't take that relationship seriously. A lot of times on submarines, like I said, they rotate a lot. So it's like, in 3 months, I'm going to have another Devo anyway. So they just don't spend the time investing into that relationship like they should. And then that JO, it's kind of like, whatever. They just dismiss them or tell them they're idiots or whatever. And so those officers then don't want to listen. And so that's kind of where you run into some of that. So it's like, you got to repair that relationship. And that's a kind of a different conversation. But yeah, it's generally going to be either they got burned before or they came in thinking they knew everything. And that coming in thinking you know everything on a submarine lasts about 10 seconds because the whole crew eats your soul and like corrects your worldview. Like if there's any nukes in the audience, like staff pickups find themselves in that boat quite a bit where they show up with more rank but no fish, and then are suddenly getting face punched by all these junior people with fish, and they don't know. They figure it out pretty quick that I told the story before where like I had one brought to me by a fully qualified second class, he's qualified lead ELT and everything. He's trying to tell this guy what to do with the daily work list, and he was a first class staff pickup that, I mean, like ink was still drying on his check-in sheet. And he brought him to me as a duty chief, and he's like, all right, what happened? And he's giving me this, I'm a first-class petty officer in the United States Navy, and blah, blah, blah. About, he told me to do this thing, and I told him no, and he told me to shut the F up. I'm like, well, okay. Like, did he tell you to do something dangerous or unsafe or, like, illegal? Like, no? Okay, well, then shut up and go do it. Like, he knows what he's doing. He's trying to teach you how to be a better ELT. Just because he's got 2 chevrons doesn't mean he doesn't know more than you. And on submarines, it's like, he's qualified and you're not, so learn from the qualified guy. Like, be humble. Same thing kind of exists in that realm where, like, you know, there's like Naval Academy graduates get stereotyped. I've worked with a ton of awesome ones, but once in a while you get somebody, and it's generally personality based, not Naval Academy, but that kind of that stereotype, you get that type of an officer that shows up and just thinks they're amazing already, or they might have been prior enlisted for 5 minutes, and so that gives them some kind of credibility or like street cred that they think they have, but they don't really. I don't know, but it's usually self-correcting on submarines. On surface ships, I'm not real sure, but it's a pretty easy thing to overcome when you approach it from that perspective. Is like, look, I'm here to help you. All I'm trying to do is help you. So why would you fight me on that? You know what I mean? And instead of trying to like just bully him into submission by telling him like, I'm your chief and you will listen to me. Like, when does that ever work with anybody? So
yeah. A next question, and I technically skipped over this by accident. As a member of a small rate community, and I'll just say that there's a CTI. What advice can you give new accessions on how to navigate a small community where it's almost guaranteed that you'll work side by side with the same people you like and dislike for the entirety of your enlistment?
So yeah, submarine community is small, but it's probably not that small. I would say like the way that I look at things is if you're really putting honest effort into things and your goals are focused on the right things, like you're really there to like help people out and just execute the mission and do whatever you can to help other people towards that end. You know what I mean? Like if your motivations are coming from a good place and you're a person that can be trusted and you demonstrate that through action and not just through things you say, right? You're generally not going to have a problem. And some of that, it'll take some time to navigate a lot of times new accession guys can't separate what's personal and professional. It makes it really difficult for them to deal with some of the professional aspects of it, especially when it's negative or you're getting some kind of criticism or getting pushed to do a thing that is outside your comfort zone or whatever. Like a lot of people take criticism and feedback personally, like it's a personal attack on your character or that we don't like you or whatever. I had a supply officer that just for the life of her, she was amazing, really intelligent. But she could not separate personal and professional. Like she thought everybody hated her. The CO and XO were out to get her. And I was just trying to convince her that wasn't the case. Like they're trying to make you better. They're trying to teach. And like their approach probably wasn't the best, but they definitely didn't hate her. Like they thought she was great. With new accession sailors, that can be the same. And it's just a maturity thing. Like a lot of new sailors are around the age of 18, 19 years old, and you haven't had to deal with some of these things in this type of an environment to be able to separate those two things out. So I think that's a good thing to focus on is figuring out like, do you have a personal problem with somebody or do they have a professional criticism of something you're doing? And then a lot of times, this is one of the things that, and this environment is good for it too, even though you guys are a lot nicer than Reddit. When I first started posting the podcast on Reddit, all the mods warned me. They're just like, "Are you sure you want to do this?" And I was like, "Yeah." Like I got thick skin. I'm like, they're not going to run me out of here. But the type of feedback you get on Reddit is just brutal sometimes, and there's definitely good stuff too, but. There's people that just go in on you and they're just flaming you the whole time. And even in that, there's some goodness. Like if you can detach from somebody telling you you're like the worst thing that's ever been, like I'm a Master Chief now, I was Senior Chief then, but like I'm an easy target and I know it, you know, like I go into an environment like that and I'm talking about leadership development stuff. It's like everybody assumes they know who I am before they listen to the podcast just because I'm in the Chiefs mess. And it's like, look, I get it. I understand what I represent and I'm working to fix some of the negative aspects of that. But I know that going in that they're going to have that view of me. So if you can detach from that and understand that, well, they don't hate me, they hate Chiefs. Well, why do they hate Chiefs? And then you're able to have that conversation. Like when you go into something where it's a negative interaction and you genuinely think somebody has a personal problem with you, okay, like, well, what do they really have a problem with? Because they don't really know you personally, even though they're deciding to treat it like a personal problem. So what do they actually have a problem with? Is it my work performance? Is it like the way that I talk or communicate? Is it something else? You know, like try to take from all those interactions, even when it's somebody that you hate, right? That has some negative criticism of you. Like, what is it? Like maybe they just are jealous because you're outperforming them and you're putting in like honest, earnest effort and it's getting recognized. And it's like those kind of things, like I ignore. Like there's always going to be people like that exist. Like I promoted really quickly through probably Chief, even Senior Chief, you could say was a little earlier than average. And the whole way up, there was a whole bunch of people trying to tear me down all the time, just because they wanted what I was getting, right? Like they wanted the recognition and validation of the things that were happening, but they didn't want to put the work in, right? Like they didn't want to do the things that you needed to do to get promoted quickly. And I was doing those things and losing a lot of sleep and not having a social life half the time. So it's like they didn't want to make any of the sacrifices, but they wanted the recognition. And so as a result of not being willing to put that work in, they're going to attack me because, well, why isn't that me? That should be me. I want those things. But they know they're not willing to put the work in. And so they're just going to like lash out. So those types of people, I just ignore as hard as it can be sometimes. It's like you're going to gain nothing by like engaging in the types of interactions you probably want to with people like that. It's like, just don't waste the energy. But those should be pretty, you're not interpreting it as a personal issue when it's not trying to communicate to you like after you get over the emotional piece of it, because that's like, even when I do podcasts, I'm pissed about always. There's really it something I try to let myself spin down for a couple days before I record anything, because I don't want to react emotionally. I want to see clearly and make sure I understand it fully. And was my emotional reaction even justified? So when you're in those types of environments, like it's, and I recommend, like, and it's, people kind of laugh at me sometimes, but because Jocko Willink has this persona as being this like meathead that does jujitsu, and that's about it. But leadership development books, like the first one I hand out, it's called Extreme Ownership. It's Jocko Willink and Leif Babin. Incredible book. And he talks a lot about that kind of stuff, like being able to detach from a situation, view it from that detached like point of view, and you're going to see a lot more things in your field of view than you did before, when you can like calm down, detach emotionally, and just be like, what's really happening here? Like, why is this person talking to me this way? Or why is this person providing this criticism or feedback that I don't like? Like, oh, I don't like it because there's a weak area that I need to plug up. Oh, okay. And then you can kind of go that route and deal with that thing. And then just understand too, like the construct of your community, it is what it is. You're going to have to deal with these people. So invest in those relationships, because if you're planning on making this a career, you're going to run into these people again, at least some of them, and some of them you're not going to like. So prepare for that. Like, try to form relationships with them, even if you don't like them, because you don't have to like them. Again, personal, professional, like you don't need to be their friend outside of work to work well with them. There's tons of people that I work really well with that I don't want to see outside of work. And it's just a thing that you understand is necessary to be able to successfully navigate that space. Like, your life's going to be better. You're going to be less stressed about work. You're going to enjoy work more if you can form relationships with these people at work where you work really well together. And then if it develops into a personal friendship, hey, great, that's bonus. But take the time to invest in those relationships, knowing that you're going to encounter these people later, because if you don't, and all you're doing is burning bridges, when you become a leader, it's going to be really hard to get the things done that you need to get done, because people are going to be like actively fighting against you, or at least like not going out of their way to help you. And that's not what I want. Like I don't want, I'm not here to win a popularity contest, but I also understand that if I need to get something done for my junior sailors, I need people to want to help me. And so when I go to another chief or another whoever, and I ask for a thing to take care of my sailor, it's like, everybody's human. So it's like, the more they like me, the more robustly they're going to want to respond to that request. Right. And I want it like yesterday. I want it as fast as I possibly can get it to help my people out. So yeah, I mean, take that into account, like recognize that those relationships matter. And while they can be just professional, like going into it, that this is how it's set up. So that you're going to have these interactions happen again, and it's going to be at an elevated pay grade, right? So like, you get into some beef with like a guy that's the same rank as you now, and then that person gets promoted a few times, and then they're your LPO at the next job. Whoops. Like, that might hurt. So, and also the last thing I'll say about it is understand people change. Like, and I don't mean like their entire character changes, but people mature, people learn, right? When I was a second class, I could make you a list of junior sailors that wanted to smother me with a pillow, right? But now I think I could make a longer list of people that don't. So it's like, just understand that like the people that you might be working with now as a junior sailor, they're all going to mature with you. They're all going to learn with you. They might encounter a mentor that corrects their worldview on some of the things that you hated about them. So give them the benefit of the doubt going in, right? Like, judge people on what they do, not on what they said 5 years ago. Or so like, let's say you're encountering a person that you didn't like going into your next duty station that you worked with 5 years ago, and a bunch of other people are saying negative things about them. Maybe they're saying it based on interactions they had years ago. Like keep it in the back of your mind somewhere, but go into it detached and judge that person on how they behave and interact with you, because you might be surprised. Those people might be saying negative things about them, like kind of how I mentioned earlier. Like, maybe that person turned it around and snapped out of it and matured, and now they're lighting the world on fire. And so those people are just jealous of their performance and the things that are happening, recognizing that performance. And when you interact with this person again, you're going to be like, oh, wow, you're awesome. because people change, people mature, people learn. So keep that in your mind too. Is that these aren't going to be the same people, even though like it's the same human being. Like they're not in the same place. They've matured, they've learned. So they might not. You might not have the same relationship. You might go into it and you guys might be best friends like after hating them on your first tour. So keep that in mind as well.
Thanks. So the next question we have here is another one that's actually more serious from our server dad, RMFN.
Awesome.
He said, Master Chief, I'm taking another question. A lot of junior enlisted lack trust in their senior leadership and do not feel sufficient trust to report when misconduct occurs. And it only takes one breach of that trust for not just the member affected, but for everyone within earshot to also lose trust in their chain of command. A lot of people arrive to this very scenario when they reach their command. My question to you is, how do you regain the trust of the crew and handle their issues and reports? Man, learn to use a period in your sentences. How are you an LN?
Maybe they're just bad at typing. So I would say I agree with pretty much everything you said. Like the part where I need to answer a question, I think, is the how do we regain trust? It's interesting because it depends on who we are, right? Like, so if the CO has lost the faith and trust of the crew, yikes, right? Like it's definitely not a thing a chief's mess can fix. Like we can mitigate it, right? If like the chief's mess is strong, and then it's like a representative in the triad maybe that isn't, because I've been in that scenario where I had so on submarines, the CMC, we call him the chief of the boat, real weak and like, I mean, to the point where it was me and another department chief were kind of literally filling the gaps, like all hands quarters. He just didn't show up. We're like, what? And I'm like, I had just checked in, and they put me back. So I was like, hey, you're going to run all hands quarters? I'm like, I guess. Like, what, do I have a choice? And I don't even know the crew's names yet. And I'm in front of the crew acting like I'm the cob. So definitely, like, you go out of your way to let the crew know that, like, without overtly saying, hey, the cob sucks, we know. You kind of go out of your way to let the crew know that, okay, we know you can't go to him, but you can come to me. As far as it's more of like a broader picture thing, like chief's mess regaining the trust of sailors in general. It's like, it's a hard thing because I think it's top down change is required, like institutional level change. I talk about it a ton on the podcast, that there's just things built into our foundation that shouldn't be, that I think allowed us to get to a place where ego plays way too big of a role in what it means to be a chief. Even though we talk about humility all the time, and we talk about like sailors are the mission and stuff like that, it's like those two things conflict, and anytime those two things are conflicting inside of a human being, I think ego is always going to win. But it's something that I think, so when there's chiefs misconduct, so if we're talking about it being a chief at any level within a command, saying something, doing something, whether it's something that like manifests as like NJP or court martial and it's on the cover of the Navy Times, or it's just something within the command where they're like voicing an opinion, or they just aren't taking care of sailors in the way that they should be, or whatever. And as a result, sailors aren't comfortable reporting misconduct. Like, there's a couple of things I'll say. It's like, one, that mess should self-correct if they're doing their jobs correctly. And a lot of times you're not going to see or know that it even happened, except by hopefully either altered behavior in that chief that was the person offending, you know, like the one that was doing the wrong thing, or by virtue of the fact that one day they're just not there anymore. I always err on the side of like, hey, just tell them what happened. You know, I always err on the side of transparency, because in the absence of it, all the junior sailors just make up their own narrative about like what actually happened. And generally it's not quite as it's not as bad as the narrative that sailors plug that gap with. So it's like, why don't we just tell them? Like, who cares? Tell them what happened, and that this sailor got detached for cause and whatever. too often, and generally when it gets to an administrative level, you'll see something. You'll see some generic blurb in the plan of the day or something that says, hey, an E7 was taken to NJP for this thing and this happened. But you don't know exactly what happened. I'm a bigger fan of, like I tell a story about, and this was a long time ago, so it's even more unique because it happened probably in 2007, maybe. A chief got a DUI in the area that I was working in, and they put him in a theater at an all hands call in front of every sailor they could pack into this theater, and made him like talk to them about what he did, why he did it, how he felt about it, the punishment that happened, like both like professionally in the Navy and like outside civilian where he's like paying all this money and doing all this stuff. Like they wanted all the junior sailors on base to know that like, hey, when a chief screws up, like not only do they get punished, but like you kind of get into that, like, well, we hold them to a higher standard. Like, and this guy like got held to a higher standard. Like he was, I mean, that was probably the worst part for him. Like he had to stand in front of that group of people and like bear everything while wearing his khakis, which I thought was appropriate. Like there's two sides to this, right? You don't get to preach all these things to all these people and not live them. And then when you're caught in a human moment, not have to be held accountable for that. And I don't just mean like administratively and then everybody doesn't get to know. And we kind of like, that's more of the sweeping under the rug that people kind of see happen. It's not that nothing happened. Like a lot of these guys or girls, right? These chiefs that are misbehaving, they end up with like a punitive letter or reprimand in their record that like they're never going to get promoted again. They probably got money taken away, but like you don't see any of that, even though it's happening. And that's a problem, right? Because that does exactly what you described in your question, right? It takes a bunch of trust and faith away from that relationship between everyone, junior sailors, officers, everyone, and the chief's mess. With this guy having to stand in front of that group of people and own it in his khakis, it did the shame he felt and the embarrassment and everything that came along with that, I thought was appropriate, but more so because then he comes off stage and you got to kind of hug him, tell him good job. And like, I hope you learn from that and you have productive conversations about why that was necessary and stuff like that. So that you don't want to beat him down to a point that we have a different problem. But it's very, very important to humanize chiefs. And I talk about this a ton on the podcast too, is we're not superheroes. And I don't know why anybody thinks that we need to portray ourselves as some kind of like infallible leadership, like exemplar. Like sure, is it the goal to be like this, like fountain of wisdom and all the stuff you hear in all the speeches? Yeah, sure. Great. But understand that these are all flawed human beings filling these roles. Like, so, and it's not a secret to anyone. And I mean, the best bullshit detector on planet Earth is a smoke pit full of E4s and E5s, man. And so like you try to peddle that crap to the people that you're trying to build a relationship of faith and trust with so that you can lead them towards the direction of mission accomplishment. Like it's not going to work. Number one, it could be like number two, they're very adept at understanding that what's true and what's not. So when we're standing there saying like, hey, you can trust us, like, and then we behave the opposite, they're not going to try. You guys aren't going to trust us. So it should be a really simple thing to understand. And I have trouble with why it's not that. Like, it's okay for your sailors to think you're a human being. I've never had more success than when I had a very human relationship with my sailors. And what I mean by that is there's a line, right? Like that good order and discipline line that has to be maintained, where I'm not going out drinking with my division and I'm not like, we're not doing anything inappropriate. And I went out of my way to do things like that to just make sure they understood that line was still there. Like, even stupid stuff. Like I wouldn't let them add me on Facebook until after either they or I transferred. And now there's like a DOD instruction that says that's a policy and all this other crap, but I think it's more for students. But anyway, it's you get into this weird spot where it's the unduly familiar thing that actually matters. However, that doesn't mean they can't be familiar. Like that doesn't mean that I don't want to know their kids' names and I don't want to know what they do on the weekend. And I don't want, like I want them to have conversations with me, but I also want them to, when they're have an issue with their wife and they were drunk and they made some good decisions, and this is a real story, and called a friend who picked him up and brought him to work to get him out of that situation, but he showed up smelling like booze to work, unshaven, looking like crap, and my LPO put him in the dry storeroom and came and got me. Like, how many sailors are going to be comfortable doing that and thinking that I'm not going to come in there with the report shit? Pulled me in there and okay, what happened? And I already knew this kid's background, like that him and his wife were having issues, and it was like at work, he was amazing, but he'd go home and they would have an argument and he would get drunk and then do something stupid. This time he got drunk, but he made some phone calls and got taken out of the situation, but he also showed up to work drunk. And so it's like very easily could have dropped an anvil on this kid's head, but I didn't. I like, okay, stay in here. Like, we just like basically sobered him up in the storeroom, talked about it, made sure he had everything he needed, and moved forward. So like you could post a poll in a Chiefs group and ask if I was wrong about that, and you'd probably get more yeses than nos. However, that kid trusted me and had more faith in my ability to lead him, and that I had his best interests at heart. Like, if I'm doing anything, I have to be doing it with that in mind. Like, am I doing what's in their best interest? Yes or no? Like, that's the first step on the flow chart. So if could I have used that mechanism? Sure. In another case, would I have? Maybe. It depends. Like, if he showed up drunk because he was like an alcoholic and we had tried every other step to take care of this kid and we just got to the point where, okay, accountability is going to happen and that's where we're at, then yeah, you're taking a different path. But with this kid, it was just the type of situation where I made the judgment that no value would be added to his life, to my life, to the Navy's mission accomplishment, to anything. This kid was better in the Navy than out of it. I just needed to figure out how to address the other problems that he had so that all his needs are met and he's focused on mission accomplishment instead of focused on the problems he has in his personal life. So, kind of with that in mind, it's like, I think that humanizing Chiefs is okay because like I went with him to every one of his court dates, talked to him about it. He could call me whenever he wanted. Like, I'm dealing with a sailor right now going through a nasty divorce, and he's like, he's mine, but he's not. Like, he worked sort of for me, like in the same office. And I mean, I've been on the phone with this kid for probably a total of 15 hours in the last week, just listening, talking him through stuff, like giving him life advice because I've been through it too, like that kind of stuff. But like, do I have to do that? No. Should I? I think so. And I think that you get to this place where it's just a human relationship, man. Like, I'm just interacting with this person the way that I would interact with like a member of my family or a really good friend, while the understanding is still there that, yeah, I'm Master Chief and he's this second class, right? I'll still go out of my way to help this kid out, and there's no reason why I can't do both. And I think that's what gets lost a lot of the time is everybody goes high and to the right with this. I got to stay way on the other side of this line or behind this door and in the mess and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, no, like, you have that private space for a particular reason, but you shouldn't be hiding in there. And there shouldn't be this like veil of secrecy and all this other crap that people talk about. Like, that shouldn't exist. Like, you want to come in the mess, knock on the door and come in. Like, freaking door should be open during business hours anyway, as far as I'm concerned. But I think that there's a lot that can be done to humanize Chiefs so that we're just sailors. Almost like I've interacted with a lot of Army, Marine Corps, and Air Force, and there's different like versions of this, but it's not nearly as bad. And especially with the Marine Corps and the Army, I think are the best at the separation doesn't really exist. Like, the respect for the position and rank does, but like they're all doing the same job, wearing the same uniform. And so it's a lot easier to not lose that trust if you have a good NCO. You know, it's like, I think we need to work on that a lot. Hopefully that answers your question. It's kind of a long one.
I think it does. I got another question here from Diplominator.
Hi, Master Chief. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, my pleasure.
So far, it's been going well. My question is, what do you think of some communities changing their warfare specialist program from less of like a foundational requirement to an E5 plus sort of thing? I know allowing anyone to get their fish, or maybe strongly encouraging it, it seems to be working for subsurface, but is that because of the nature of subsurface, or is that way actually better? Better meaning, I don't know, like a more knowledgeable force overall, or the pin meaning something? Take that as you will, I guess. But
Yeah, I hate it. And I hate when I'm directing that hate at is the way that other warfare communities do it by making it that type of a requirement that you described. So I think the reason it works on submarines is one, it is a foundational requirement. It's required. You will not, if you go greater than, I believe, 14 months now, I'd have to check the book, greater than 14 months during your first submarine tour without attaining your dolphins. And there's like remediation stuff, like you'll get a couple of opportunities to board for your fish, stuff like that. But like if you completely wash out and you cannot earn your dolphins, you leave the submarine community permanently. So it's a hard and fast requirement during your first tour on a submarine that thou shalt get your dolphins. So I think that's part of the reason it works, is it's understood going in that it's a requirement that we take really seriously. But we take it really seriously because in the submarine community, the lines blur a lot between rates and stuff. So like we joke like, yeah, I'm a stew burner and that's what I do. But I also stand diving officer of the watch, which is the most senior enlisted watch station on the submarine. Even though nukes will argue with engineering watch supervisor, they'll also lose. I love nukes, but I had to get that in. But it's like there's a lot of blurring between lines where like we don't have D seamen on submarines. We fight all the casualties. So like flooding, fire, everything. Like we go there and we do the thing. We put on FFEs and SCBAs, and so there's that part of it as well, where there's this understanding that like you're a submariner first, so you need to be able to fight the ship. Like if I'm in the machinery room doing something and a piece of gear bursts into flames, I need to know where the nearest 4MC is. I need to know where the nearest fire hose is. I need to know how to use it. I need to know how to properly call the thing away on the 4MC. I need to know where to secure things. I need to know where emergency flood control is to keep the water out of the people tank if something starts flooding, right? Like on and on it goes. So there's a lot of focus put on the damage control aspect of it as well, because the lines blur so much on submarines. And then the last part of it is like there's a heritage piece to it where like you could see pictures of Eugene Fluckey wearing his dolphins, Jimmy Carter, dolphins, right? Like there's a lot of significant figures, not just in naval heritage, but in like U.S. history that were submariners. That you go back to World War II, you see the guys that like the warfare pin used to be a sleeve patch on the dress blues for enlisted. And so and I got a case of them here in my office right now that I collect all like the deep wave dolphins and the patches and all that stuff. So there's a lot of heritage behind it that we take very seriously. You walk into any submarine base, into like the command building or some of the other buildings, you're going to see submarine Medal of Honor winners on the wall. I guarantee it. Like there's going to be picture frames and all the submarine Medal of Honor winners are going to be on the wall. And that's a big part of it too, I think, is that it's been built into our community for so long that there's this rich heritage there. And so it's like, it means a lot to the people that earn it. And that importance has like stuck in the community for a really long time. Like when you go down onto a submarine, like every submarine takes that thing really seriously. And so it's like you grow up in a community where everybody takes it very seriously, and you're taught and indoctrinated into that culture when you first show up, that how big of a deal your dolphins is. So and it's really hard because you're trying to stay and watch, and you're FSAing, or you're doing whatever, and you're trying to do quals, and you're trying to qualify these watch stations. And it's just like, so during that first 12 months approximately, like some get it faster, some take a little bit longer and get into the remediation piece, but they still end up earning them. When you finally earn it, it's like this, it feels like a gigantic achievement. And it is. And so I think that when they started talking about a lot of this went back to when Rick West was MCPON, I think, when they might have had conversation before that, but that's when I remember it is I think he's the guy at MCPON that like made it a requirement for E5s. And what he was trying to work towards was trying to inject some of that stuff that he saw work in the submarine community into the rest of the Navy. The reason I hate that it's like this later requirement or not a requirement at all in some communities is like the whole purpose of it in my mind, and this is obviously biased from a submariner's perspective, this is how I view warfare pins because this is how dolphins were for me, is whatever we're talking about, it's like it should be focused on your war fighting specialty, right? So if you're an Airedale, like earning your airpin should be like a really deep dive on how to be the best like aviation war fighter you can possibly be in the capacity that you're doing it, right? When we start getting shot at in wherever we are, right? You think about like what's the manifest destiny, like what's the purpose of the United States military, and so what's the purpose of the Navy? It's to kill people and break their stuff, right? Like we exist to fight wars. So when that actually happens, are we going to be ready to do that? Like, are we going to be in a place where we're out there getting after it, doing great things, and we're able to fight hurt, we're able to like repair the ship, combat casualties, do all the things we need to do to apply the tools that we have at our disposal to like fight a war and win it? Or are we going to be in a place where everybody's trying to figure out what to do with their hands because they're not familiar with anything but their exact like specialty in their small worldview, right? Like I don't want, and like on my submarine, I'd have logistics specialists that could like break you out all the parts and do all the logistics things and order you all the things that they needed. And then they could also go up to control and drive the submarine. And they could do that when there's flooding. They could do that when we're getting run over by a ship. They can do that when we're evading torpedoes. Like they know what they're doing. They could lose propulsion. They could lose like hydraulics. So now they got to do stuff manually, and they know how to shift all their gear. So it's like, there's things that I think we can and should do a lot better, because I think that we don't spend enough time thinking about like what's going to happen when we start getting shot at. And it's a very real possibility in the world we live in that we're going to be in a shooting war in our lifetime. I might not be my naval lifetime, but it's probably going to be some of your lifetimes. And so when we get to that place, are we going to be ready to do it? For those of you that listen to the podcast, there's this BMC named Jason Thompson that I talk to a lot. And one of the things he said to me was I think they were doing like map packages or something. And he kind of gave me an excerpt from the package that he sent up about this BM2. And it wasn't like he wasn't doing bake sales, and he didn't have 10 collateral duties. But he said when he was writing the write-up for it, his thing was like, if we went to war tomorrow, this is the guy I'd want with me. And Jason Thompson's been to war, so like he knows what he's talking about. And so it's something that I think a lot of value would be added if all the other warfare communities applied it in a way that was very similar to the way submarines do it, and took it that seriously. And I know, like, I've talked to some people on surface ships, and they're like, yeah, well, our ESOS program's amazing. It's really difficult. And like, they take it very seriously. And when you're done, you know how to fight the ship. And it's like, awesome. Is everybody doing that? I don't think they are, because I've heard a lot more of, oh, it's a joke, and you just run around and get your book signed and then learn just enough to pass in a world board, and that's it. And so, yeah, I think it's a mechanism that exists that we are not taking advantage of, and I think we're gonna regret it if we ever find ourselves in a shooting war. I think we're gonna learn a lot of really hard lessons as a result of that, and I don't want to look backwards and wish we had done it. You know what I mean? So that's one of those things that like I've always kind of been grossed out by the way that and it's not everybody, because like I've talked to some expeditionary guys, they take it very seriously. SEALs obviously take it very seriously. Like there's other communities, EOD, that it's very similar. Like because it's what they do is so serious that how could it not be? But also so is what we all do, right? Because in the event that we're in a shooting war with a major state actor, it's like, yeah, guess what? Everybody's job's going to get very real very quickly. And you're not going to be able to hide in the supply shack and just be an LS. That's not how the world's going to work.
We have a tie-in question for this. Actually, it's kind of relevant.
Go ahead.
This one comes from IS3 Tex, and he says, my command is forcing me to get my surface pin before my IW pin. I feel like right now I should get my IW pin first, because he's an IS.
Mhm. All right, is he on a ship?
I would imagine so. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if we're assuming he's on some Haze Gray, and we're thinking about it like I just described it, I lean towards him getting his ESWAS first. It'd be like him. So if we had ISs on submarines, right, and they had an IW program, it's like I get what you're saying, but think about what we're talking about, right? Like, do I want you to qualify your IS watch first? Sure. Yeah, I do. But I also want you to be working on your ESWAS so you know how to fight the ship. Because if we find ourselves in a situation like sailors in quals for submarines, like they're not fully qualified, but they know how to do some stuff. And I've seen a seaman recruit that's been on board for 3 months and doesn't have his dolphins call away a fire appropriately and start the response that's needed to keep us from being in a really bad spot. And so I would lean towards that because, again, not that the intelligence stuff isn't important, but if you think about what's going to be the most important if somebody shoots a missile at your ship and it hits, like what's going to be the most important? Is it going to be intel stuff? Not that that's not important, but there are intel guys there that are qualified, and gals, right? Sorry, pronouns. There are people there fully qualified to do that job. You're getting ready to relieve them, and that's important. We want you to progress. We want you to qualify all those things. We want you to get your IW pin so you're the best possible intel guy that you can be. But if somebody shoots at your ship and it hits, what's the most important thing, right? And so for me, it's like on submarines, you get your dolphins first. Like that's kind of the most important thing. Do I need you to stand a watch right now? And are we getting shot at? No. So like you're doing them in parallel, but like if we're talking about a warfare pin, like which one do I want you to be working on first? If you're on a ship, I want you working on your ESWAS pin first. Again, looking at it through the lens of submarine dolphin, like procedure and kind of the way that the way we treat it.
I guess as an aside, he is an IS-3 and he isn't allowed to get his pin until he's an E5, but
oh yeah, I did not know that.
I'm hoping there's a policy that if he did get his ship pin first, that he would be able to work on his IW pin before.
Yeah, and I mean, there's waivers for everything. I mean, a special request ship might solve that problem. I don't know what the instruction says, but yeah, it's not a bad thing to get your IW pin at all. I think it's awesome, but like, where do I need you, and what do I need you doing when stuff starts exploding? Like, if you're on a ship, I need you doing that stuff. So,
interestingly, I kind of, because I come from the intel community, like, and I've been deployed as well on a naval platform.
Please hit the like button, drop a comment down below on what you thought, and subscribe to the channel. Check out the rest of the episode in part 2, and don't give up the ship.